Brittany had always been the foundation of Billy's dreams, the silent force behind his ambitions. When they first met, he had nothing but a pocket full of ideas and a heart full of hope. She believed in him, worked extra shifts to support his business, and even put her own dreams on hold so that he could pursue his. When he failed, she was there, lifting him up, whispering encouragement, telling him that success was just one step away. She never asked for much, just his love and appreciation, which in the beginning he gave freely. But as time passed, Billy became more ambitious, hungrier for success, and Brittany became nothing more than a shadow in his life. He stopped noticing the little things she did for him, the way she sacrificed her comfort so he could shine. The gratitude in his eyes faded, replaced with indifference, then annoyance. Brittany convinced herself that this was normal, that maybe Billy was just stressed, that things would get better once his business took off. But something about his demeanor had changed. He no longer held her the way he used to, no longer confided in her like before. His laughter, once warm and full of love, had grown forced, distant. Nights that were once filled with whispered dreams and tender touches became cold and silent. She told herself it was just a phase, that all marriages went through rough patches. But deep down, an unsettling fear gnawed at her heart. Something was slipping away, and she didn't know how to hold on to it. It started subtly. Billy's new work associate, Loretta, a woman who carried herself with an effortless confidence that Brittany had never possessed. She was beautiful in an intimidating way, always dressed in designer outfits, her voice smooth as silk. Brittany noticed the way Billy's eyes lingered on her, the way his mood shifted whenever Loretta was around. At first, Brittany dismissed it, reassuring herself that Billy loved her, that their years together meant something. But the signs became harder to ignore. Billy started staying out late, claiming he was meeting clients, yet he always smelled of expensive perfume when he got home. He became obsessed with his appearance, buying new clothes, changing his cologne, and even getting a gym membership despite never caring for fitness before. Brittany saw the changes, but chose to believe Billy's lies, clinging to the illusion of their marriage. One evening, she decided to confront him, standing in the doorway as he adjusted his tie. "Who is Loretta?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Billy sighed as if exhausted by the question. "She's a colleague, Brittany. Don't start with your paranoia," he said dismissively. But she saw the flicker of guilt in his eyes, the way he avoided looking at her directly. Her stomach twisted, but she forced a smile. "Okay," she murmured, pretending to believe him. But deep down, she knew Loretta wasn't just a colleague, and Billy wasn't just working late. Billy's transformation happened so gradually that Brittany almost didn't notice when her husband became a stranger to her. He was no longer the man who used to kiss her on the forehead before leaving for work, the man who used to wrap his arms around her when they watched movies on the couch. The shift was subtle at first: missed dinners, unread messages, an absent-minded "I love you" that lacked sincerity. Then it became impossible to ignore. He started dressing differently, trading his simple shirts for tailored suits, spending hours at the gym, and keeping his phone locked at all times. He used to share his dreams with her, but now every conversation felt like she was pulling teeth just to get a response. "You're always so distant," Brittany said one evening as he scrolled through his phone, barely acknowledging her. Billy sighed, placing his phone face down on the table. "I'm just busy, Brittany. Not everything is about you." The coldness in his voice made her flinch, but she forced a smile, nodding as if that explanation was enough. But it wasn't just the emotional distance. It was the way he looked at her, or rather, how he stopped looking at her. There was a time when his gaze would soften whenever their eyes met, when he would reach for her hand, just because. Now, his eyes skimmed past her as if she were just another object in the room, something familiar but unimportant. Brittany tried to push away the sinking feeling in her chest, the growing fear that her marriage was slipping through her fingers. "Billy, are we okay?" she finally asked one night as they lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. He was silent for a long time before responding. "Yeah, we're fine." But the way he turned away from her, the way he pulled the covers tighter around himself, told her everything she needed to know. The night Brittany saw the truth with her own eyes, she felt something inside her shatter. She hadn't planned on following Billy, but when he left the house in a hurry, claiming he had a late-night meeting, something in her gut told her otherwise. She grabbed her car keys and drove after him, her heart pounding against her ribs as she watched him pull into a dimly lit restaurant. Her hands trembled as she stepped inside, scanning the room. And then she saw them, Billy and Loretta, sitting at an intimate table, their heads close together, Loretta laughing at something he whispered in her ear. Brittany stood frozen, nausea rising in her throat as she watched her husband reach for Loretta's hand, caressing it the way he used to do with hers. It was real. The affair was real. Every doubt, every sleepless night, every anxious thought, it was all real. Summoning every ounce of strength, she walked up to their table, her voice steady but laced with pain. "Having a good time?" she asked, making both of them turn. Billy's face paled, but Loretta only smirked, twirling her wine glass between her fingers. "Oh, Brittany," she said mockingly. "You really should have stayed home." Billy stood up, his jaw clenched. "Brittany, let's not do this here," he said, as if she were the one embarrassing him. Her lips trembled, but she refused to let the tears fall. "I gave you everything, Billy," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I stood by you when you had nothing, and this is how you repay me?" But Billy didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. Instead, he exhaled sharply and muttered, "Just go home, Brittany." That was when she realized he wasn't even sorry. Brittany had always thought that if her marriage ever ended, it would be with a fight, with words filled with regret, with some acknowledgement of the love they once shared. But when Billy handed her the divorce papers, it was cold, matter-of-fact, like a business transaction rather than the unraveling of a decade-long relationship. "I think this is for the best," he said, his tone void of emotion. Brittany stared at the stack of papers in front of her, her fingers numb as she traced the letters of her own name. This wasn't supposed to be happening. The man she had built a life with, sacrificed so much for, was walking away as if she had never mattered. "Billy, is there nothing left to fight for?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He exhaled sharply, rubbing his temple. "Brittany, please. Let's not make this harder than it has to be." Harder for who? Certainly not for him. Signing the papers felt like signing away a piece of herself, but she forced her hand to move, her signature stark against the white page. It was done. The moment she placed the pen down, Billy exhaled in relief. Relief. That was what hurt the most. She had loved him with everything she had, and all he felt was relief to be rid of her. As she walked out of the lawyer's office, the sun felt too bright, the air too thick. Then she saw him, Billy, standing across the street, laughing as he wrapped his arms around Loretta, pressing a kiss to her lips in broad daylight. Brittany felt the tears she had been holding back finally spill over. He didn't even wait. He didn't even pretend to grieve what they had lost. In that moment, something inside her hardened. He had moved on, and she would too. Brittany sat in the middle of her near-empty apartment, staring at the boxes that held the remnants of a life she had spent years building. The walls felt smaller, suffocating even, a stark contrast to the spacious home she once shared with Billy. But it wasn't just the space she had lost. It was the security, the familiarity, the certainty of belonging somewhere. She had spent so long being a wife that she had forgotten how to be just Brittany. The loneliness was unbearable, creeping into every quiet moment, whispering doubts into her mind. At night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how love had turned to nothing so easily. Rent was a struggle, and grocery shopping became a careful calculation of what she needed versus what she could afford. The life she once had, lavish dinners, weekend getaways, shopping without checking the price tags, felt like a cruel dream. But if there was one thing Brittany had always known how to do, it was survive. She refused to let Billy's betrayal define her. She picked up extra shifts at work, forced herself to go outside, and even tried to embrace solitude rather than fear it. One afternoon, as she walked past a boutique, she caught her reflection in the glass, tired eyes, dull skin, shoulders weighed down by exhaustion. This wasn't who she was meant to be. Clenching her jaw, she stepped inside, bought herself a new dress, and made a silent promise. Billy took everything from her, but he would not take her ability to rebuild. Billy sat across from Loretta at an upscale restaurant, watching as she scrolled through her phone, barely acknowledging his presence. The novelty of their relationship was beginning to wear off, the excitement replaced with expectations he never had to meet with Brittany. Loretta wasn't patient. She demanded things. Expensive things. New jewelry, five-star vacations, gifts that proved his love. It had once felt thrilling, a reward for all the years of struggle, but now it felt like a never-ending game he was doomed to lose. "Billy, did you hear me?" Loretta snapped, her manicured nails tapping against the table. He blinked, realizing she had been talking. "Yeah, of course," he lied. She narrowed her eyes, unimpressed. "Then what did I say?" He exhaled, pinching the bridge of his nose. He had no idea. Regret was an ugly thing, creeping up in quiet moments when he least expected it. It wasn't loud or dramatic, it was subtle. It was the way he reached for his phone to text Brittany, only to remember she wasn't his to call anymore. It was the way his apartment felt colder, emptier, lacking the warmth of someone who truly cared. One evening, as he scrolled through his social media, he stumbled upon an old picture of them. Brittany laughing, her head thrown back, eyes crinkling at the corners. She had always been happy with so little. His chest tightened as he clicked on her profile, only to realize she had blocked him. That was when it hit him. He had been so busy replacing her, he never stopped to consider that one day she might not want him back. Brittany had grown used to keeping her head down, to blending into the background. But that changed the day she met Russell Montgomery. She had been rushing through work, balancing coffee trays, when she bumped into someone, hot liquid spilling over his sleeve. Horrified, she looked up, only to meet the sharp, unreadable gaze of a man who exuded power. "I'm so sorry," she gasped, reaching for napkins, but he simply chuckled, waving off her apology. "It's just coffee. No need to look like you committed a crime." His voice was deep, smooth, with the kind of confidence that came naturally to men like him. That should have been the end of it, but as she turned to leave, he called after her. "What's your name?" She hesitated before answering. "Brittany." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "You're wasted here." With that, he handed her a business card and walked away. She thought nothing of it until days later, when she found herself staring at the card, contemplating the offer she never expected. Russell Montgomery was a name she had heard before, a self-made millionaire, respected, ruthless, and known for spotting potential in people before they saw it in themselves. Was it possible that he saw something in her? A week later, she walked into his office, her heart hammering against her ribs as she sat across from him. "I don't know what you see in me," she admitted honestly. Russell leaned forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "I see a woman who's been underestimated for far too long. Let me show you what you're worth, Brittany." And just like that, her world started to change. Brittany wasn't sure if she belonged in Russell Montgomery's world. The polished offices, the sharp-dressed executives, the fast-paced energy. It was intimidating. But she had made a promise to herself. She would not be defined by the ruins of her past. On her first day, she walked into Russell's company determined to prove she was more than just a woman scorned. The tasks were demanding, the expectations higher than anything she had experienced before. But she adapted quickly. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was learning, growing, evolving. Russell was a hard mentor. He pushed her beyond her limits, never allowing her to doubt herself. "You need to stop looking at yourself as if you're still the woman he left behind," he told her one evening after a particularly grueling day. "You're not her anymore." Brittany swallowed hard because he was right. She had spent so long being Billy's wife that she never considered who she could be without him. With time, Brittany's confidence blossomed. She learned how to negotiate, how to command a room, how to own her worth. She upgraded her wardrobe, not for Billy or to impress anyone else, but for herself. The woman staring back at her in the mirror no longer looked fragile or lost. She looked capable. But success didn't erase the scars of betrayal, nor did it shield her from the whispers. Billy had seen her transformation. She knew because he had started liking her old photos, sending cryptic messages she ignored. He thought he still had a hold on her, but Brittany had outgrown him. And as she walked into her office one morning, finding Russell waiting for her with a knowing smirk. She realized something else. She wasn't just rebuilding her life. She was stepping into something greater. The invitation had been unexpected, an exclusive gala, a high-profile event filled with the wealthiest and most influential figures in the city. Russell insisted she attend, not just as an employee, but as someone who belonged. Brittany hesitated at first, still adjusting to this new world. But as she stood in front of the mirror that evening, wearing a sleek black gown that hugged her curves, she barely recognized herself. Gone was the woman who once shrank in Billy's presence, who waited for love that was never returned. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was thriving. When she stepped into the grand ballroom that night, the room seemed to pause. Heads turned, whispers followed, but Brittany held her head high. And then she saw him. Billy, standing across the room, dressed in an expensive suit, holding a drink in his hand. His eyes widened, and for the first time, Brittany saw something in his expression that had never been there before. Regret. She felt nothing but indifference. As she turned away, focusing on the conversation at hand, Billy made his way toward her. But before he could reach her, Russell smoothly intercepted, placing a protective hand on her waist. "Is there a problem here?" Russell's voice was firm, his presence commanding. Billy's jaw clenched, his gaze flickering between them. "No problem at all," he muttered, though his clenched fists told another story. Brittany looked him in the eye for the first time in months, offering him a polite but distant smile. He had been her past, but this moment was her future. Billy had spent months convincing himself that his life was better without Brittany, that he had made the right decision by choosing Loretta. But watching her that night, seeing the way she carried herself with confidence he had never seen before, shook him in ways he wasn't prepared for. She had always been beautiful, but this was different. She wasn't his Brittany anymore. She was something more, something untouchable. And the way Russell stood beside her, as if he belonged there, made Billy's stomach twist. He told himself it was just surprise, that seeing her after all this time was unexpected. But deep down, an uncomfortable truth clawed at him. He had underestimated her. The more Billy tried to ignore it, the worse it got. Loretta had noticed his shift in behavior. "Why are you so tense?" she asked one night as they sat at an upscale lounge. Billy took a sip of his drink, forcing a smirk. "I'm fine." But she wasn't fooled. "It's her, isn't it?" Brittany. Her voice was laced with amusement rather than jealousy, and that irritated him. Loretta leaned back, swirling her wine glass. "You thought she'd be miserable without you, didn't you?" She let out a soft laugh, shaking her head. "Newsflash, Billy, you were just a chapter in her story. And she's writing a damn good ending without you." The words stung more than they should have, because for the first time, Billy realized that Brittany wasn't just moving on, she was moving up. And he was the one left behind. Brittany had almost forgotten what it felt like to be around Billy, to hear his voice, to sense his presence lingering close. But fate had its own cruel way of reminding her. One afternoon, as she sat in a quiet cafe, going over documents for a new project, she heard a familiar voice order coffee at the counter. Her fingers tightened around her pen as she slowly looked up. Billy. He was standing just a few feet away, looking just as shocked to see her. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the air thick with tension. Then, with that old, cocky smirk, he stepped forward. "Brittany," he said, as if testing how her name felt on his tongue. "You look different." She tilted her head, feigning indifference. "And you look the same," she replied, her voice cool, detached. She expected him to make some excuse to leave, but instead, he pulled out the chair across from her. "I was hoping we could talk," Billy admitted, his tone softer than before. Brittany exhaled, closing the folder in front of her. "Talk?" She raised an eyebrow. "About what? How you replaced me like an outdated accessory." He flinched at her words, but didn't deny them. "I never meant to hurt you, Brittany." A bitter smile curled on her lips. "And yet you did." She stood up, grabbing her purse. "You lost the right to sit at my table the moment you chose someone else over me." She turned on her heel, walking away with her head held high, leaving Billy alone in a place he never expected, drowning in regret. Billy tried to tell himself that seeing Brittany again meant nothing, but the lie didn't hold. It gnawed at him in ways he couldn't ignore, twisting something deep in his gut. Meanwhile, his once thrilling relationship with Loretta was starting to show cracks he could no longer patch up. Loretta wasn't the doting woman she had pretended to be. She was restless, distracted, always whispering on the phone and leaving their home at odd hours. "Who are you always talking to?" Billy finally asked one evening, his patience wearing thin. Loretta didn't even look up from her phone. "It's business," she said dismissively. He clenched his jaw, knowing that was a lie. The tension between them had become unbearable, and for the first time, Billy realized he wasn't in control of this relationship. He never had been. The final straw came when he walked into their apartment one evening to find Loretta dressed to the nines, slipping on diamond earrings. "Where are you going?" he asked, his voice sharp. Loretta barely spared him a glance. "Out," he narrowed his eyes. "With who?" Finally, she looked at him, her lips curling into a slow, taunting smile. "Does it matter?" His stomach dropped. Loretta had never been his. She had simply been passing time. And now, she was getting bored. For the first time since leaving Brittany, Billy felt something terrifying, the realization that he had built his new life on nothing but illusions. Russell had always been observant, and he had been watching Brittany carefully. She wasn't just efficient, she was driven, intelligent, and had a quiet strength that intrigued him. Over the months, he had watched her transform from a woman carrying the weight of betrayal into someone who commanded respect. It was admirable, but it was also something more. He was drawn to her. At first, he ignored it, convincing himself it was just admiration for a capable employee. But as he found himself lingering in conversations with her longer than necessary, noticing the way her eyes lit up when she talked about new projects, he realized it wasn't just professional interest. One evening, after a late business meeting, he made a decision. "Have dinner with me," he said as they walked to the parking lot. Brittany blinked, clearly taken aback. "Dinner?" she repeated. "As in, work-related?" Russell smirked. "No, as in, me wanting to spend time with you outside of work." Brittany hesitated, searching his face for any sign of insincerity. She had been burned before, and the idea of opening her heart again terrified her. "Russell," she started, but he held up a hand. "No pressure," he said easily. "I just think you're an incredible woman, and I'd like to get to know you beyond business meetings and contracts." For a moment, she considered saying no, retreating into the safety of solitude. But then she thought about how far she had come, how much she had grown beyond the woman Billy left behind. She smiled softly, tilting her head. "Dinner, huh?" Russell chuckled. "Just one. If you hate it, we never have to do it again." She exhaled, then nodded. "All right, Russell. One dinner." As she walked away, she felt something unfamiliar flutter in her chest, hope. Billy had always been the type of man who assumed people would wait for him. He thought he could walk away from Brittany, live his fantasy with Loretta, and still have the option of going back if things didn't work out. But now reality was sinking in like a slow poison. Brittany was slipping further away, becoming someone untouchable, someone he no longer had access to. It didn't help that Loretta had grown even colder, barely hiding her disdain for him anymore. One evening, he found himself scrolling through Brittany's social media, something he had never done when they were together. Every post, every photo, every success she shared felt like a punch to the gut. She wasn't the heartbroken woman he had expected her to be. She was glowing, standing beside powerful people, moving forward without a single glance in his direction. The sight of her standing next to Russell, laughing at something he said, made Billy's blood boil. Had she really moved on? Desperation clawed at him, and before he could think it through, he grabbed his phone and dialed her number. The line rang, and his pulse quickened. But instead of Brittany's voice, he heard an automated message. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." He pulled the phone away, staring at the screen in disbelief. She had changed her number. The realization hit him like a brick. Brittany had completely cut him out of her life. Panic surged in his chest as he ran a hand through his hair, pacing the floor. He needed to see her, to talk to her, to undo whatever damage had been done. But deep down, beneath all his arrogance, a cold truth gnawed at him. There was nothing left to undo. Billy's suspicions about Loretta weren't just paranoia, they were facts waiting to be uncovered. And it didn't take much to expose the truth. He had noticed her secretive behavior for weeks, the way she barely looked at him anymore, how she always had an excuse for coming home late. But it was the perfume, the unfamiliar scent that lingered on her skin, that made his stomach churn with unease. One night, driven by suspicion, he followed her. He didn't even feel shame about it. He needed to know. The moment he saw her stepping into a high-end restaurant, dressed in a sleek red dress, his worst fears were confirmed. But it wasn't just that she was there, it was who she was there with. A man, a wealthy one, judging by the way he carried himself. Billy stood frozen, watching from the entrance as Loretta laughed, tilting her head in that way she used to do with him. She reached across the table, touching the man's hand, the same way she had once touched his. Something inside him snapped. He stormed forward, slamming his hands on their table, causing glasses to rattle. "Having a nice night?" he asked, his voice low, controlled, but burning with barely contained rage. Loretta sighed, looking up at him without an ounce of guilt. "Billy," she said lazily, as if he were an inconvenience. "This is pathetic." The man across from her smirked, clearly unbothered. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, barely sparing Billy a glance. Billy clenched his fists, humiliation sinking in. "You lied to me," he hissed at Loretta. But she only laughed, taking a sip of her wine. "Oh, Billy," she murmured. "You really thought I'd settle for you forever?" The words stung like a slap, and as the restaurant's patrons whispered, as waiters hovered nearby, waiting to intervene, Billy finally understood. He had never been the one in control, he had been the fool all along. Billy had never felt real humiliation before, not like this. The sting of Loretta's betrayal was one thing, but the public nature of it, the way everyone in that restaurant had witnessed his downfall, made it unbearable. He had always thought of himself as the man who could manipulate situations, twist things in his favor. But here he was, reduced to nothing more than a discarded afterthought. Loretta didn't try to follow him when he left the restaurant. She didn't call, didn't offer an excuse. That was when it truly hit him. He was replaceable. Just as he had treated Brittany as disposable, just as he had thrown away a love built on sacrifice and loyalty, he was now the one being tossed aside. The irony was so bitter, it burned. That night, he went home to an empty apartment, the silence heavier than ever. He reached for his phone, his fingers hovering over Brittany's old contact before remembering she was gone. Days passed, and the weight of his choices suffocated him. He tried to drown it out with work, with distractions, but nothing filled the void. He wasn't just losing, he had already lost. One evening, as he sat alone in his living room, staring at the empty space where Loretta's belongings used to be, he finally said the words he had refused to acknowledge for so long. "I made a mistake," he whispered, voice hollow. But there was no one there to hear him. No Brittany to comfort him, no Loretta to pretend to love him. He had built his entire life on illusions, and now, standing amidst the wreckage, he finally understood what regret truly felt like. And the worst part, there was no undoing it. Brittany didn't realize how much she had changed until she caught her own reflection in a passing mirror at a luxury event. The woman staring back at her was unrecognizable. There was confidence in her posture, a quiet elegance in her gaze that hadn't existed before. No longer weighed down by heartbreak, she had stepped into a world that once seemed out of reach. At work, she thrived under Russell's mentorship, securing deals, making connections, and commanding respect in rooms where she had once felt invisible. But it wasn't just about career success. She had rebuilt herself from the ground up. The timid woman who once begged for love was gone, replaced by someone who understood her worth. And for the first time in a long time, she felt free. That night, she stood beside Russell at the event, her sleek gown hugging her figure, the soft glow of chandeliers reflecting in her eyes. "You belong here," Russell murmured, his voice low and certain. Brittany turned to him, her lips curving into a smile. "I know." But just as she was beginning to enjoy the evening, a familiar presence sent a chill down her spine. She didn't have to look to know who it was. Across the room, Billy stood frozen, staring at her like a man seeing a ghost. His gaze raked over her, drinking in the transformation he had never expected. She wasn't the woman he left behind, she was someone greater. And as he took a hesitant step forward, as if trying to close the distance, Brittany did something she never imagined she would do. She turned her back on him. She had nothing left to say, nothing left to prove. Billy had chosen his path, and she had finally outgrown him. Billy had never been one to believe in fate, but sitting at an upscale restaurant, nursing a drink he barely touched, he wondered if the universe was punishing him. He hadn't planned on seeing Brittany again so soon, but there she was, seated at a private table, her laughter filling the air like a melody he had long forgotten. And beside her, Russell. The man exuded power, his presence effortlessly commanding the room. But what made Billy's stomach twist wasn't the wealth or the influence, it was the way he looked at Brittany. Like she was the most precious thing in the world. Billy clenched his jaw, gripping his glass tighter. That used to be him. He used to be the one sitting across from her, making her smile, being the center of her world. But now, he was nothing more than an outsider looking in. The moment turned unbearable when Russell reached into his pocket and pulled out a velvet box, placing it on the table. Billy's heart nearly stopped. Brittany's eyes widened, her lips parting in surprise. Every muscle in Billy's body tensed, his breathing shallow as he watched Russell flip open the box, revealing a stunning diamond ring. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Russell took her hand, his expression warm yet serious. "Brittany," he began, his voice steady. "I don't want to spend another day imagining my life without you. Marry me." Billy felt something inside him break. He had spent months trying to convince himself that he could fix things, that maybe there was a chance. But there was no coming back from this. Brittany wasn't just moving on, she was moving forward without him. Before Brittany could respond, a sudden burst of laughter shattered the moment. A familiar, mocking voice rang through the restaurant. Loretta. She was seated just a few tables away, her red lips curved into a cruel smirk. "Oh, this is priceless," she drawled, swirling the wine in her glass. All eyes turned to her as she stood, stepping closer to their table. "You really thought you had it all figured out, didn't you, Billy?" Her gaze flickered toward Russell. "You too, huh? How adorable." Russell's expression remained unreadable, but Brittany's jaw tightened. "What the hell are you doing, Loretta?" Billy demanded, his patience unraveling. Loretta laughed, shaking her head. "Oh, don't act surprised. You had to know it was only a matter of time before I got bored of you." She leaned in, her voice dripping with amusement. "I never loved you, Billy. I used you. Just like you used Brittany." Gasps echoed through the restaurant, but Loretta wasn't finished. She turned to Brittany. "And you should be thanking me. If I hadn't taken out the trash, you wouldn't have ended up with an upgrade." Brittany didn't flinch, didn't even blink. She simply stood, calm and composed, and looked Loretta dead in the eye. "You know what, Loretta?" she said smoothly, tilting her head. "You're absolutely right." Loretta's smirk faltered. Brittany stepped closer, lowering her voice so only the three of them could hear. "You thought you were destroying me, but all you did was set me free." She turned toward Russell and smiled. "And I couldn't be happier." Without another glance at Billy or Loretta, Brittany slipped her hand into Russell's and said the words that would haunt Billy for the rest of his life. "Yes, I'll marry you." As the restaurant erupted in applause, Billy stood in the middle of the wreckage of his own choices, watching the woman he once took for granted walk away forever. Billy had always thought he could walk through life without consequences, that no matter what he did, he would always land on his feet. But standing there in that restaurant, surrounded by whispers and judgmental stares, he realized how wrong he had been. Loretta had stripped him bare in front of an audience, exposing the ugly truth he had refused to admit. He had been nothing more than a pawn in her game. And worse, Brittany had witnessed it all. He turned toward her, half expecting to see pity in her eyes, some sign that she still cared, but there was nothing. No anger, no sadness, just indifference. The weight of that hit harder than any insult Loretta had thrown at him. Brittany had truly let him go, and now she belonged to another man, a man who valued her in a way Billy never did. The applause from the crowd as she accepted Russell's proposal was deafening, drowning out every thought in his head. Loretta, meanwhile, looked amused, as if this had been nothing more than a game to her. She leaned in close, lowering her voice so only Billy could hear. "How does it feel?" she whispered, her tone dripping with mockery. "To finally know what it's like to be discarded?" Billy clenched his jaw, his fists curling at his sides. He wanted to say something, to fight back, but there was nothing left to fight for. Brittany was gone, Loretta had played her part and moved on, and he was alone. As she walked away, leaving him standing amidst the wreckage of his choices, Billy felt something he had never felt before: shame. The world had watched him fall, and this time there was no one left to catch him. The moment Brittany stepped out of the restaurant, the weight of everything that had just happened hit her. But instead of sadness, she felt free. She had been waiting for this moment for so long, the moment Billy would finally see what he lost. And yet, as she walked toward Russell's car, hand in hand with him, she realized she didn't care. The pain Billy had caused her had already healed, the wounds had already closed. She wasn't standing in front of him to prove a point or seek revenge. She had simply outgrown him. "Are you okay?" Russell asked softly, watching her carefully. Brittany turned to him, a slow smile spreading across her lips. "I've never been better." And for the first time in years, she meant it. Later that night, as she sat in her apartment, reflecting on the night's events, she realized just how much she had changed. The old Brittany would have been shaken, questioning herself, wondering if she had done something to deserve Billy's betrayal. But this version of herself, she felt nothing but peace. Her phone buzzed, and she glanced down to see a message from Billy. She hesitated for only a second before opening it. "Can we talk?" A few months ago, she might have entertained the idea, might have given him one last chance to explain himself. But now, she simply deleted the message and turned off her phone. Billy was a chapter she had finished reading, and there was no need to revisit old pages. Billy had never known what it felt like to spiral until now. The weeks after that night in the restaurant were a blur. Whispers followed him everywhere. Business associates who once respected him now looked at him with pity. Even Loretta's departure had caused a ripple effect, exposing him for the fool he had been. His once thriving business started to decline, his partnerships dissolving one by one. It wasn't just about Brittany or Loretta anymore. His entire life was unraveling. He tried to distract himself, diving into work, going out to clubs, seeking comfort in meaningless flings. But nothing filled the emptiness. One night, sitting alone in his dark apartment, he stared at an old photo of him and Brittany from years ago. She had always been his stability, his foundation, and he had thrown it all away. Desperation clawed at him, and before he could stop himself, he drove to Brittany's apartment. He didn't even know what he would say. He just needed to see her. Needed to believe that there was still a chance. But when he arrived, his chest tightened. Russell was there. They stood in the doorway, laughing, Brittany leaning into him with a comfort that was undeniable. Billy swallowed the lump in his throat, watching as Russell brushed a stray curl from her face, his touch gentle. Brittany looked up at him with pure adoration. Billy's heart twisted painfully. She had never looked at him like that, and in that moment he finally understood. Brittany wasn't just happy without him, she was happier. With a deep breath, Billy turned and walked away, finally accepting that he had lost her forever. Billy had rehearsed what he would say 100 times in his mind, but now, standing outside Brittany's office, his hands were clammy, his heart hammering against his chest. What was he even hoping for? Forgiveness? Closure? A second chance? He didn't know. All he knew was that he had to see her, had to make things right. He walked past the reception desk, ignoring the questioning looks, and entered her office unannounced. Brittany looked up, startled for a brief moment before her expression hardened into unreadable calm. She had been expecting this. "Billy," she greeted coolly, setting down her pen. "To what do I owe the surprise visit?" He swallowed hard, trying to find the right words. I needed to talk to you." He exhaled, stepping closer. "I need you to know that I regret everything, Brittany. I was a fool, and I didn't realize what I had until it was gone." Brittany sat back, arms crossed, unimpressed. "And what do you expect me to do with that, Billy? Rewrite the past?" Her voice was firm, but there was no malice, just finality. He shook his head quickly. "No, I don't expect anything. He ran a hand through his hair, looking at her the way a starving man looked at food. I miss you. I miss us. A humorless chuckle escaped her lips. There is no us anymore. She stood, adjusting her blazer, her tone unwavering. Billy, I forgive you. Not for you, but for me. But that doesn't mean I want you back. She stepped past him, leaving him standing alone in the office that once would have felt like home. Now, it was just another place where he no longer belonged. Loretta had spent her life climbing her way to the top, using men as stepping stones, believing she was untouchable. But what she failed to understand was that karma never forgot an address. After publicly humiliating Billy and discarding him like yesterday's news, she had moved on to wealthier prey, thinking her life would only get better. But the man she had latched onto, the same one she had paraded in front of Billy, wasn't as gullible. He played her at her own game. One evening, as she prepared for a high society gala, her phone buzzed with a single devastating message. Her credit cards had been frozen, her lavish lifestyle wiped out in an instant. Panic surged through her as she dialed his number, but the call went straight to voicemail. It was only then that she realized she had been replaced, just as she had done to Billy, just as she had done to countless others. Frantic, she tried to salvage what she could, but the damage was done. Word spread quickly. Loretta was no longer the woman to impress, but the woman to avoid. Those who once welcomed her into their circles turned their backs, unwilling to associate with a woman whose currency was deception. Desperate, she swallowed her pride and called Billy, hoping to mend what she had broken, to have a safety net to fall back on. But when he answered, his voice was colder than she had ever heard. "You thought I'd save you," he said, a bitter chuckle following. "Now you know what it feels like to be disposable." With that, he hung up, leaving her exactly where she had left him, alone, without anyone to pick up the pieces. Billy never thought he would be the man who lost everything. He had once believed he was untouchable, that success and love would always be at his fingertips. But life had proven him wrong. Loretta had destroyed what was left of his reputation. Business associates no longer took his calls, and the empire he had built with Brittany's unwavering support was crumbling beneath him. He was drowning, and no one was reaching in to pull him out. His apartment, once a symbol of his so-called independence, now felt empty, cold, like a prison he had built for himself. The realization struck him hard. He had traded something real for something temporary. And now he had nothing. Not Brittany, not Loretta, not even his dignity. One evening, after yet another deal had fallen through, Billy sat in the darkness of his apartment, his hands shaking as he reached for his phone. He typed out a message to Brittany, one last plea, one last attempt to fix what he had broken. But as his thumb hovered over the send button, he hesitated. What would it change? She was happy, thriving, loved by a man who valued her. He had seen it with his own eyes. And for the first time, he accepted that he had no right to disrupt her peace. Instead of sending the message, he deleted it. Then, he did something he never thought he would. He let her go. And as the weight of that truth settled over him, he realized this was his rock bottom. But Brittany? She was standing at the top, where she had always belonged. Brittany had always believed that love should be built on trust, respect, and admiration, and with Russell, that was exactly what she had found. Their relationship didn't come with suffocating expectations or unspoken doubts. It was effortless, secure. Unlike Billy, who had taken her sacrifices for granted, Russell valued every part of her, not just as his partner, but as an equal. She had spent so much of her past fighting to be seen, to be enough, but here, she didn't have to prove anything. One evening, as they strolled along the waterfront, Russell suddenly stopped, pulling her close. "You know," he murmured, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face, "I've never met anyone who makes me want to be a better man the way you do." Brittany smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. "That's because you already are," she whispered. The love between them didn't need grand gestures to be real. It was in the small things, the way Russell always reached for her hand, how he listened without interruption, how he saw her, truly saw her. Their love was a safe haven, something she had never experienced before. As they sat on a park bench, watching the city lights shimmer in the water, Russell turned to her, his eyes filled with quiet certainty. "I don't want us to rush, Brittany. I just want you to know that wherever life takes us, I'll always be right here beside you." And for the first time, love didn't feel like something she had to chase. It had finally found her. Billy had learned to live with regret, but nothing compared to the pain of watching Brittany be truly happy without him. It was one thing to lose her. It was another to witness her flourish in ways she never had when she was with him. Everywhere he turned, he saw her name in headlines, heard whispers of her success, saw photos of her and Russell looking untouchable together. He told himself he should be happy for her, but the truth was jealousy and regret twisted inside him like a sickness. He had always thought he would have another chance, that life would somehow bring them back together. But reality had proven otherwise. One evening, he found himself parked outside her office, staring at the building, knowing she was inside, so close yet entirely out of reach. As he watched her step out, laughing at something Russell said, something in Billy finally broke. This was it. The final confirmation that she had moved forward while he was stuck in the past. He wanted to call out to her, to tell her he was sorry, to promise he had changed. But what good would it do? She had made her choice, and this time it didn't include him. His hands clenched around the steering wheel as Russell pressed a kiss to Brittany's forehead. Their love so effortless, so real. Billy had been given everything, and he had thrown it away. And now he had to live with the fact that he would never get it back. Brittany had never intended to send Billy an invitation, but closure had a way of finding its own path. When the gold-embossed envelope landed on Billy's doorstep, he stared at it for a long time, his pulse hammering in his ears. He knew what it was before he even opened it, but seeing her name beside Russell's, reading the words, "With joy, we invite you to celebrate our love," it felt like a knife twisting in his chest. He had always known this day would come, but nothing could have prepared him for the finality of it. She was truly gone. His hands trembled as he ran his fingers over the invitation, memories crashing down on him. The nights they had spent dreaming about the future, the way she had once believed in him more than anyone else. And yet, he had let her slip through his fingers. He thought about going, about standing in the back just to see her one last time. But what good would it do? Brittany wasn't his to chase anymore. She had moved on, created a new life, and he had no place in it. Taking a deep breath, Billy walked to the fireplace, watching as the flames flickered before tossing the invitation inside. The paper curled, turning to ash within seconds. It was done. He wouldn't ruin her day with his presence. He would let her go the way he should have all those years ago. For the first time, he accepted that she had won, and he had lost. The day of Brittany's wedding was filled with golden sunlight, the air crisp with the scent of fresh roses. She stood in front of the mirror, her heart steady, her soul at peace. She had been through so much, had endured heartbreak that once threatened to break her. But now, she had never felt stronger. As she adjusted her veil, a soft knock came at the door. Monica, her maid of honor, peeked inside, her eyes glistening with emotion. "Are you ready?" Brittany turned to her, a slow smile spreading across her lips. "I've been ready for a long time." As she walked down the aisle, her gaze locked with Russell's, and everything else faded away. There was no lingering pain, no shadows of the past. Only the man who had shown her what love was supposed to feel like. Billy wasn't there, and that was exactly how it should be. She didn't need to look back. She didn't need to question if she was making the right choice. She had chosen herself long before she had chosen Russell, and that was what mattered. As she reached the altar, Russell took her hands, his voice steady with love. "I promise to cherish you, to stand beside you, to love you in all the ways you deserve." Brittany exhaled, her heart full, her past finally behind her. "And I promise to never let myself forget how much I deserve it." And with that, she stepped into the life she had always been meant for, one filled with love, with joy, with everything Billy had never given her. And as the final chapter of her old life closed, Brittany knew this was only the beginning of something far greater. Here's the Bible verse for the story Proverbs 14 verse 1. "The wise woman builds her house, but with her own hands the foolish one tears hers down." This verse reflects Brittany's journey of growth, self-worth, and resilience, while highlighting Billy's downfall due to his own arrogance and poor choices. Brittany, despite being betrayed, rebuilt her life with wisdom, while Billy, through his selfishness, destroyed everything that once mattered. Moral of the story: value the people who genuinely love you, because once trust is broken, some things can never be repaired. This story teaches us that love is not just about emotions, but about appreciation, respect, and loyalty. Brittany gave Billy everything, but he took her for granted, believing she would always be there. By the time he realized his mistake, it was too late. Meanwhile, Brittany's story is a testament to the power of healing, self-discovery, and finding love that truly values her. True happiness comes not from seeking validation from the past, but from moving forward and embracing the future with self-worth and dignity. That's the end of the story. What did you learn from this story? Drop your thoughts in the comments section. Leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on post notification so that you'll be notified whenever we drop our next videos. Also, share this video to someone who might be interested. Thank you so much for watching.